Look who's here with us still, Michael W. Smith. He's going to play for us in the After the Show as well.
What a way to end the show. Grammy Award-winning Honest. What was that last song you just played? No More Crying?
No More Crying.
Beautiful song. Where can people find your new album?
iTunes.
Everywhere.
Barnes & Noble. Lots of places. Yeah.
Absolutely.
America.
Yeah, America.
Head to foxandfriends.com. After the show, he's going to do another song.
Have a good Sunday, everybody.
Great Sunday. We will too. We're going to keep eating and not dieting.
All right, guys.
Good Sunday morning. President Trump touts tax reform in one battleground state ahead of key primaries this week. A federal judge accuses special counsel Mueller's team of lying, and the president says a date and location has now been set for his anticipated meeting with North Korea's dictator as a deadline looms for a decision on the Iran nuclear deal. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Thanks for joining us. This is Sunday Morning Futures. Primary voters head to the polls in several states this Tuesday, including Ohio, where President Trump just held a tax reform roundtable. We'll talk to House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy coming up about the Republican midterm strategy. We'll also get his reaction to Nancy Pelosi saying the Democrats will win back the House. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice facing new pressure this morning, all as special counsel Robert Mueller's team gets a tongue lashing from one judge. And two advisors are fired. FBI Director Jim Comey's advisors, they are leaving the agency. We will tell you who. Then former Senator and Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Joe Lieberman talks about how President Trump should approach the threats and opportunities with North Korea and Iran as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. And the race for control of Congress kicks into high gear as voters in several key battleground states prepare to head to the polls for Tuesday's primary. And the stakes are high. Republicans are looking to lock in several Senate seats come November in hopes of breaking the long-standing trend of whoever holds the White House almost always loses seats come the midterm elections. Something Democrats are pretty much banking on, most notably House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. She expressed confidence that they will retake control of the House come November. Joining me now to discuss all of that is House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, potentially the next Speaker of the House. Good to see you, sir. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for letting me come on with you.
Yeah, you know, I want to kick it off right there because Nancy Pelosi had a lot to say this last week. We have it up on a graphic. She told I think it was the Boston Globe, we will win in November and I will run once again to be the Speaker of the House. And you say?
It's probably one of the scariest things I've heard all week because picture it come November 9th, waking up if the Democrats controlled the House and Nancy giving this congratulatory speech and becoming Speaker. What we had just transpired in the last year will all be reversed. So the number we just got today, unemployment below 4%. We have not seen that in more than 18 years. If you have a child going off to college, it's their entire lifetime. Instead of them fearful leaving college and moving back home, they're going to get a job. You look at 90% of all Americans, they got a pay raise with the tax cut. Nancy Pelosi called that Armageddon and made sure no Democrat would vote for that. You've got 48 out of 50 states, their electrical bills are lower because of that tax cut. That would be reversed. Or 2 million more jobs in the last year. North Korea now talking to South Korea. The VA reform that no longer a GI Bill is only 15 years or you lose it. Battling human trafficking. Something we've been trying for the last 10 years. We have now shut down Backpage. Those things on the internet that contribute 70% of all the 100,000 people who are trafficked in America. And we have so much more to do. Opioids. We just passed 60 bills inside the subcommittee. And you know what the Democrats did? The exact same thing they were doing on tax. They fought us. But Republicans will stay with it. Every American knows somebody who's addicted, and we will solve this problem. Infrastructure, reforming Dodd-Frank so these community banks could actually do what they're supposed to do in their own community.
Yeah, you have a great story to tell. I mean, certainly on the economic side of things, with the impact of the tax cuts, impact of the rollback in regulations, people are feeling better, and we are seeing it in the numbers. I agree that the Democrats are going to have to answer the question, why didn't you vote for the tax cut plan? So is that your plan in terms of holding on to the House? Because we know that history is not on your side, right? During the middle of a presidential term, usually that party does lose seats.
Only 2 times since World War II has the party in power that had the White House on our side gained seats, 1998 and 2002. I believe at the end of this day, Nancy Pelosi will not be Speaker. Republicans will keep the majority, not because we want it to happen, because what we have achieved. You are finding that the world is becoming safer. We've made the investments into our military. You have found that we have made economic strength. Don't discount unemployment below 4%, first time in 18 years. That is unbelievable in the stretch of where we're going. 2 million more jobs have been created just in the last year. How many millions of people have got a bonus because of the tax cut? Just think of this. One company gave 1.2 million people a longer maternity leave. But what does Nancy think of all that? She thinks that's crumbs and that's Armageddon.
Yeah.
But reforming the VA, infrastructure, dealing with human trafficking, opioid, these are things that matter to the American public. That's what we're focused on. That's what we'll stay focused on. So if you looked at the generic ballot earlier this year, yeah, if the election was in January, they would have won. Today, they would lose.
Wow. All right. Well, we'll be watching that. Obviously, it's a good story to tell on the economic side. And typically speaking, people do vote with their wallet.
Yes.
How am I feeling today? Am I feeling better than I was 2 years ago? Let me ask you about what you've been working on in terms of the spending bill, or the rescission bill, really. You're expecting the White House to send to Congress something this week. Where does that stand?
Well, you first have to understand, what does the rescission bill allow you to do? We've watched most of this frustration with Congress happens in the Senate, and not with the Republicans in the Senate, but the Democrats, because it takes 60 votes to do anything. When we look to repeal this burdensome regulatory world, remember, you have a Congressional Review Act that allows you to pass it in the House and Senate with a simple majority. Well, we did that 16 times. Nobody else has ever to do that except one time. Rescissions was actually a common practice from President Ford to Clinton. Ronald Reagan did it 214 times. Bill Clinton did it 111 times. And what it allows you to do is look at spending, make a cut, pass it with a majority in the House and 51 votes in the Senate. I believe this shouldn't be a partisan idea. It wasn't in the past. So let's go find places that we could have savings. There are accounts that are funded that those programs no longer exist or can't be used. So why would the money stay there? Repeal it and bring it back. And so we've worked with the president. This is something he's trying to make sure. Let's cut wasteful spending. I think that should be a bipartisan plan. But watching Nancy, everything is partisan.
But it wasn't bipartisan when you actually had the chance to say no to this and no to Planned Parenthood and no to something else, health care. You signed the bill. So where are the areas to actually cut? Can you identify some areas that you could?
This is how the program works. OMB puts it together, sends it to the House, and we have 45 days to act, and it takes 51. So they are looking at accounts that have been sitting there, that have been funded, that programs are no longer existing, but the money's sitting there. Why wouldn't you cut that wasteful spending? If there is a place that we could save the taxpayer money, we should look at that, and especially bipartisan. But look, I asked Steny Hoyer the other day in a colloquy. He said he would look at something like that because they have a history of voting for it, but now they're denying everything, just like they're trying to deny the president these appointments. There's 1,200 positions that have to be confirmed. If you take the last 6 presidencies, in the first 2 years, there was only 24 cloture votes. Today, there's 88.
Wow.
They are trying to dismantle government in the process. They're trying to make the president not successful. But you know what? We are winning in the process, and we will keep making sure we're fighting. I don't care if they fight the opioids. We will get this done.
How do you keep dealing with that, though? I mean, the constant resist on the other side, this slow walking of nominees. I'm actually amazed that this president is able to handle things like North Korea, Iran deal, and this decision coming up in the face of all of this resistance. Is this what it's going to be like the next 3 years?
It shouldn't be. The election is over, and we should work as one. You know, we should put the people before the politics. But if they continue down this path, what they're doing in the Senate today, it would take 11 years to confirm these people. And all that does is hurt the American public.
It's incredible. Meanwhile, on the other side, we've been talking about this potential abuse of power at the FBI and the Department of Justice. You heard Devin Nunes earlier call into Fox and Friends, and he basically said, we're done. We are ready now to pursue contempt of Congress charges because you're not getting the documents that your committee chairmen have asked for. How far are you willing to go with this? Are you going to pursue contempt and impeachment charges?
Well, first, let's actually talk about what we're seeing. It's not just us, and it's not just the American people. Last Friday, a federal judge, T.S. Eliot, said this to Mueller's investigation. that he does not believe a special prosecutor has the power, he or she, to do anything they want. Unfettered power, I think the term he actually used. What they're watching today and what he questioned, look, everybody wanted to get to the bottom, was there any collusion with Russia? The millions of dollars are spent, all the investigation, everybody says there was none. It is time for Mueller to end that investigation. Everybody sees it and where he's trying to draw it to. Now, it's not just the judge, but it's the American public. Remember, we have separate but co-equal branches of government. For too long, the DOJ and the FBI has been stonewalling Washington, has been stonewalling Congress. Congress has a right to oversee it. Devin Nunes is chairman of the Intel Committee. So classified information can be sent to the Intel Committee, not to the entire body. That is the role that they have. But for every time they have stonewalled us, we have not given up. And when we did get the information, it was very interesting how the information would come forward, that people would then start resigning or quitting from these organizations based upon the action that they took place. I think, from my point of view, is we will not stop because we are separate but co-equal, and we will take every process that we have in the power to get the information that we have a right and responsibility to see.
There was an op-ed in the Journal by Kim Strassel on Friday, and she writes, the credibility of the House's oversight authority is at stake. Paul Ryan's committee chairmen have done remarkable work exposing FBI behavior. They serve backup. Mr. Ryan needs to state strongly and publicly that he has zero qualms about proceeding down the road of contempt of impeachment if House demands are not met. You are likely, if you hold on to the House, the next Speaker of the House. Are you going to pursue this?
Yes, you have to uphold the power of the separation of powers here. It's not about this issue, it's about Congress in itself. We have a right and responsibility. If this is allowed during this investigation, it could be in anything else. And that's what the judge was talking about last Friday, the unfettered power of this individual. That is wrong, and these agencies have to have the responsibility to provide the information to Congress.
Yes.
And it's provided to the Republicans and the Democrats. That's the responsibility. Look, every 2 years, the public loans the power to their member of Congress to oversee. That's the role we have, and we have to uphold that power.
All of this stonewalling leads to the question, what are they hiding? Why not just give the documents that your committee chairmen have been requesting?
Yeah, and if they're claiming it's classified, yes, don't give it to all of Congress, but that's why we set up the Intel Committee to start out with. They handle classified information all the time because they should oversee that. And the rest of Congress doesn't see it, but that is their role. So they can't hide behind that.
Yep.
The other part is, it's interesting, Lisa Page leaving now. The Inspector General's report is coming soon. The more and more we learn about this, the more we realize, one, there was no collusion. Two, this continues on, it should not. These investigations should end, the millions of dollars that have been spent, and we should get on with Americans' business. Think about this. The president, in a few short weeks, is going to be sitting down with North Korea and South Korea. No one thought that was possible a year ago or even beyond. There's the possibility of ending the Korean War, of the thousands of lives that Americans have given. Let's make this president as strong as he can in that opportunity that we have to make the world safer.
Well, he's been making some bold decisions. I mean, even the idea that he could actually pull out of the Iran deal. The deadline's coming up, May 12th. Are you comfortable, as the majority leader, seeing the president say, you know what, I'm not renewing this on May 12th?
I'm very comfortable. The president is looking at this, looking at all sides. Look at what former Secretary of State Condi Rice recently said. She said she never would have signed it, and she said, if we pull out, I don't get the phrase correctly, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Right? What Iran is doing in this agreement, why it is so bad, not only did they get billions of dollars, they spent that money fostering terrorism around the world. They can have a nuclear weapon at the end of this agreement. They continue to test their ballistic missiles. They are not creating more freedom in this world. Someone has to stand up to them. And I'm sorry, if we pull out of that, the size of their economy, based upon the size of ours, I think Europe will follow us before they're concerned about the Iranian economy. And think about their own revolution inside there. Their youth are frustrated with them spending this money around the world, fostering and bringing terrorism and unsafe for all of us, when they should be focused on their own economy. It's time someone stands up to them. That was a bad deal to start with, and history will show that was the wrong agreement, and I'm thankful that the president is looking at all options.
All right, we're going to leave it there and follow the developments. Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, it's good to see you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Kevin McCarthy there. We will continue this conversation. Former Attorney General Judge Michael Mukasey joins me next with his take on the DOJ and the FBI as we look ahead on Sunday. In addition to President Trump's legal team is now calling for an end to special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Attorney and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani saying Attorney General Jeff Sessions should close the probe. This coming amid pressure from Republicans urging the Justice Department to release the full scope memo, which outlines the initial extent of the investigation. Joining me right now is Judge Michael Mukasey. He is former U.S. Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Judge, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for weighing in here.
Good to be here.
Really wanting to get your insights here because there are so many moving parts. First off, a turning point perhaps on Friday night when we heard from the district judge pushing back on special counsel Robert Mueller. Tell us what we heard on Friday and what it means.
I think what we heard on Friday is the fruit of the rather bitter fruit of the fact that this investigation was launched initially in a flawed way. The regulations require that in order to have a special counsel, there has to be a finding that there is a criminal case to be investigated, criminal case it's got to be, and that there is a conflict, some good reason, a conflict or other good reason why the Justice Department can't do it. And under those circumstances, what the Attorney General or whoever's acting for him, in this case the deputy, is obligated to do is to tell the special counsel what the crime is and to put forth a specific set of facts. The memo that was originally drafted appointing Robert Mueller says that you are to follow up questions of Russian involvement in the election as testified to by James Comey on a particular date before the House Intelligence Subcommittee. What he testified to was not a criminal investigation. It was a counterintelligence investigation. So right from the get-go, to say that you're authorized to pursue that investigation is flawed. Apparently, Rod Rosenstein realized that at some point later in the game and changed the memo, put in an additional memo supposedly specifying what was being investigated and what the crime was. But we haven't been allowed to see that.
Why not? I mean, if the mandate is expanded in terms of what Mueller should be pursuing, we all should understand that because we keep calling it this Russia probe.
Right. Well, maybe it is a Russia probe, but the point is, what's the crime and what is the specific set of facts? And when the government was asked about that before Judge Ellis, what the response was, oh, this is much too classified for us to disclose in open court. Essentially, what they're telling the judge is, don't worry your pretty little head about it. And judges, whether they're men or women, don't like to hear that.
Right. And this is T.S. Ellis for the first time, a pushback against this investigation that's gone so far afield.
I think that the judge would be very much within his rights in saying, look, you come back in a week and you bring either the letter or the memo that expands the special counsel's mandate, or you bring your toothbrush.
You know what, Judge, stay with us. I want to ask you about these questions that were leaked that Robert Mueller wants to ask the president. We're going to get into that more with Judge Michael Mukasey when we come right back as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Future. Stay right there. Judge, I want to talk to you and get your take on these questions that were leaked. These are the questions that Robert Mueller apparently wants to ask Trump about obstruction and what it means. Some of the questions are things like, what was your reaction to news reports of January 12th? What did you know about Sally Yates meetings with Mr. Flynn? And then there's one question about an interview that I did with the president. And the question is, what was the purpose of your April 11, 2017 statement to Maria Bartiromo? And that statement is on the screen. Basically, it's me talking with the president about Jim Comey after he was fired for breaking the Justice Department policy. Here's a clip from my interview with the president.
Director
well, that's why I'm asking. Why is he still in the job?
No, I'm just saying, well, because I want to give everybody a good, fair chance. Director Comey was very, very good to Hillary Clinton, that I can tell you. If he weren't, she would be right now going to trial.
It's an odd clip that Robert Mueller is zeroing in on to ask the president about. What do you think about these questions and about that?
Well, if the question is intended to ask whether the president wants to suggest to the Justice Department that it start an investigation or continue an investigation of Hillary Clinton, that's not within the mandate as I understand it, of the special counsel. A number of other of these questions are not within the mandate of the special counsel, or they tend toward determining whether the president had a quote-unquote corrupt motive in firing Jim Comey, which, if we were talking about obstruction, could conceivably make an obstruction case, but we're not, number one. And number two, if we were, the president can't be indicted.
So once again, these questions indicate how far afield this investigation has gone. First, we were talking about collusion. Then we were talking about obstruction. Now we're talking about payments to Stormy Daniels.
Which, of course, have nothing to do with whether the Russians interfered with the 2016 election. That was supposed to be the focus of the investigation. That was supposed to be the reason why Jeff Sessions recused himself, because he worked on the campaign. And if it was an investigation of the campaign, there is a regulation that says that you can't participate in an investigation of a campaign in which you participated.
Right.
Very simple. So he was justified in doing that, if that was the focus of the special counsel's investigation. But we don't know to this day what the actual focus is, because we haven't seen that memo.
So are we going to be able to see that scope memo now that we know that Rosenstein actually did expand the mandate for which Robert Mueller is supposed to pursue? I
don't know whether he expanded it or contracted it. He, in any event, defined it. And we should see the memo. Whether we're going to be able to or not, I guess, depends on how robust our system is. If it's robust, we'll see it.
What's your take on where this is going? I mean, these are extraordinary times, Judge. You've got the Robert Mueller investigation that's going all over the place, and then you've got an investigation into the handling of the 2016 election by the FBI and the Department of Justice. On that score, we're waiting for this IG report, which is forthcoming next couple of weeks. Do you think we'll see justice?
I hope that what we will see is the justice that the facts justify, and that people will stop dealing with things for reasons having nothing to do with the facts, the way, for example, Jim Comey did, because he had some higher loyalty in mind, but rather because of what the facts and the law require. If we get that kind of reaction to the IG report, to this memo of the Deputy Attorney General, then we'll be fine. It depends on how healthy our institutions are.
Well, we see that Lisa Page has resigned, attorney at the FBI and the Department of Justice, and we see that Mr. Baker has also. Is this a coincidence that the IG report is coming out and we're seeing more resignations?
I don't know whether it's a coincidence or not. I guess we'll find it out when we read the report, and even at that point, we'll be speculating.
What have you?
I worry less about why they resigned than I do about what we do with what's in the report, and particularly what we do to define, specify, and explain the mandate of a special counsel who is, whether he's doing the Lord's work or the devil's work, is interfering with the functioning of the presidency. Is that justified? We won't know that until we see that memo.
It is pretty extraordinary that all of this, Jim Comey is on a book tour.
Yes, well, Jim Comey is another case. I would suggest that you read his book, I don't want to say with a grain of salt, but certainly with a bottle of Pepto-Bismol.
Because?
Because it is cringe-inducing on every page. He is self-laudatory. There's no story he tells of which he isn't the hero. And you can't really reach for a character. People suggested that he's like Inspector Javert in Les Miserables. He's worse than that. He's a combination of false humility, false piety, and false courage.
He can't even say that that he leaked, when we know that when he gave his memos to his friend, who then we learned worked for the FBI, he actually leaked them with an intent to get a special counsel in place.
Correct.
It's pretty extraordinary. Judge, it's great to see you.
Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Judge Michael Mukasey there. We have more reaction to all of this. Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe sits on the House Judiciary Committee. He'll join me next as we look now. We have breaking news. The Department of Justice is saying that they have responded to Devin Nunes. He was on Fox and Friends earlier, saying that his latest classified letter to the DOJ was ignored. The letter from the DOJ, which they are sending, spells out the administration's written response, says the DOJ. DOJ. Now, basically, Devin Nunes said that 2 weeks ago that he sent a letter to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, a classified letter per usual. This is from Devin Nunes. It was ignored, not acknowledged, completely ignored. Last week, we sent a subpoena. Then on Thursday, we discovered they're not going to comply with our subpoena. Nunes told Fox and Friends, this is information we need. We need to move quickly to hold the Attorney General of the United States in contempt. That is what I will press for this week. Also, right now, we want to talk about what's happening with Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe. He sits on the House Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees. He is also a former U.S. attorney. Good to see you, sir. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
Hi, Maria.
Your response to what the DOJ is saying this morning, it says it, in fact, sent a letter back to Devin Nunes and said, we are in receipt of your letter after careful evaluation and following consultations with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the FBI, the White House, and the Department. We are not in a position to provide information responsive to your request. Your take on all of this, Congressman?
Well, Maria, I haven't seen the subpoena that Devin Nunes was talking about, so I don't know if it relates to the EC that started the counterintelligence or if it relates to something else.
Bottom line, will you move to pursue contempt charges against Attorney General Jeff Sessions, as Devin Nunes stated earlier?
I think that all members of Congress are going to need more information about what the request was and what the response from the Justice Department is. We don't have that. The problem, Maria, as you know, is that when Congress issues a subpoena, the enforcement arm is the Department of Justice. The problem is when the subpoena is directed to the Department of Justice and they won't comply with the subpoena, Congress is left with the decision of whether or not to hold officials in contempt and ultimately seek impeachment. So it's not a great system, but I think before we go to those very extraordinary measures, everyone ought to have a better sense of what both Chairman Nunes and the Department of Justice are arguing about.
Well, what tools do you have? I mean, if you're asking for these documents and you're not getting them and you're seeing that things are being slow-walked and ignored, what's the next move that you can do in order to get justice here as you continue an investigation into the FBI and the DOJ's handling of the 2016 election?
That's exactly the problem that we've had, Maria, and one of the things that I think members of Congress will look at in regards to the Department of Justice's response to Chairman Nunes is we've seen a number of documents where there has been slow walking or stonewalling for different reasons, for various privileges, for national security concerns. And the Department of Justice, where I served, a department that I love, its hand has been weakened by the fact that as those documents, as Congress has pressed and those documents have come out, we found that a lot of the information that's been redacted or kept from public view have really reflected more on the department or the FBI and its senior officials, and to save them from embarrassment or from potential infractions or misconduct. So, you know, I do think that it's fair to ask these questions. I know that all members of Congress, you know, hopefully will get that information. We all need to have that information before we would go to the extraordinary measure of holding an Attorney General in contempt of Congress. Okay. I certainly need that information.
What about this? The federal judge presiding over the Paul Manafort case, Congressman, he's demanding that Robert Mueller's team show him the scope of their investigation into the alleged Russian collusion. Judge T.S. Ellis, as I was just talking with Michael Mukasey about, with a harsh rebuke to the special counsel, suggesting that Mueller only cares about information Manafort may have on the president. This is all an exercise to take down President Trump. And Ellis says Mueller should not be given, quote, unfettered power. What do you think this tells us about the special counsel investigation?
Maria, the fundamental premise of our criminal justice system is that we investigate crime or suspicious activity. We don't investigate people with the intent of uncovering criminality. And it has appeared to many that maybe that's what the special counsel was doing with respect to Rick Gates and Paul Manafort and potential bank fraud in 2005. To create cooperational leverage against this investigation into Donald Trump. That's exactly the question that this judge raised on Friday, and he's the first independent person, a jurist, to raise this issue. And he has said, hey, it appears that you're attempting to use what Paul Manafort did in 2005 to get to Donald Trump in 2018, and I want to see your authority for that. I want to see the jurisdictional basis that you have to even raise these charges. Interestingly, the special counsel's response was, Judge, you're not entitled to that. And the judge, not so politely, said, I'll be the judge of what I'm entitled to and produce it in the next 2 weeks. Well, so we'll see where that goes.
Well, what about this Mueller probe? I mean, you and I have spoken in the past. You know, it started with collusion, then it went to obstruction. Now we're talking about payments made to Stormy Daniels. This investigation has clearly gone much further afield than we thought with the initial mandate of Russia collusion.
Yeah, I think that, you know, very clearly there was a scope for the special counsel to be looking at Russian collusion, and it has gotten far afield of that. I think the judge in this case, interestingly, is maybe exercising some oversight that the Department of Justice hasn't been. I think this can be effectively narrowed down. The special counsel shouldn't be looking at, for instance, obstruction of justice at this point in time. Even setting aside the question of whether or not a president can be charged for something that the Constitution authorizes him to do in firing an FBI director, even to the extent you want to look at that, Jim Comey, through his actions, his words, and his writing, has effectively torpedoed any obstruction of justice charges. So the special counsel ought to move on away from that and really look at what the core basis of his appointment was, which was whether or not there was any collusion between or coordination with the Trump campaign and Russians.
Congressman, real quick, what should we expect from the IG report? This report is forthcoming. We're expecting it sometime in the month of May.
I would expect that what the Inspector General is going to find is that former FBI Director Jim Comey violated his employment agreement, made multiple unauthorized disclosures or leaks of information, perhaps classified, but at least FBI documents, and has made demonstrably false statements to Congress and perhaps to investigators for the IG. So, you know, I will say this. I think that Michael Horowitz has proven himself to be a fair umpire with respect to calling balls and strikes. He had the courage to make a criminal referral of the deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe. And so I think if it's warranted that there is any criminality that needs to be referred with respect to Jim Comey or anyone else at the Department of Justice or the FBI, that Michael Horowitz will do that. So,
and Michael Horowitz was supposed to be speaking and testifying in front of Trey Gowdy's committee, the Oversight Committee, but they pushed that back.
Yeah, and I think that's a reflection of the fact that the Inspector General is getting more information into the Hillary Clinton email investigation and improprieties or perhaps misconduct in how that matter was handled. He wants to be thorough and fair. So, you know, I'd rather wait a week or two to get more information, because the more information that the Inspector General can provide to Congress, the more oversight that we can provide and hold folks accountable to the extent that they need to be.
All right, we will be watching this. As Kimberly Strassel wrote in her op-ed in the Journal on Friday, this puts a real spotlight on the credibility of the House's oversight authority. So we will be watching that, Congressman. Good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
You bet.
Congressman John Ratcliffe there. President Trump, meanwhile, faces a big deadline this May 12th on the Iran nuclear deal. What his decision could mean for the United States. Senator Joe Lieberman is with me now. President Trump's deadline on the Iran nuclear deal is approaching. It is now less than a week away. The regime's president, Hassan Rouhani, is warning this president of, quote, historic regret, unquote, should the U.S. pull out of this nuclear agreement. This comes amid reports that claim former Secretary of State John Kerry is secretly meeting with world leaders to try to salvage this deal. I want to bring in former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman, chairman of the advocacy group United Against Nuclear Iran, former chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, and former Democratic vice presidential candidate himself. Sir, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. First off, what is your sense of where we are going here? Do you think the U.S. pulls out, and what are the implications?
Well, I'm encouraged by what the president has said so far, and I hope he does pull out, because I give you the perspective of somebody who was in the Senate for 24 years, worked with people in both parties to put sanctions, economic pressure on Iran with a singular goal, which was to denuclearize Iran, to stop their nuclear weapons development program. And what the Obama administration and our allies in Europe did was not that. It basically gave away all our leverage against them in return for a pause in their nuclear program, if they're keeping their word, which they don't have a good reputation for doing. And it gave them $100 billion, which they've used to support terrorists and to spread their rule throughout the Middle East. So it was a bad deal, a mistake for us. I think the president really has the power to correct that mistake, and I hope he does.
What are the most egregious parts of this plan? What's the worst part of the nuclear deal, and why is it that we need to get out?
Yeah, well, the worst part of the nuclear deal is that it didn't really end Iran's nuclear program. It's clear that they've got tremendous capacity. They basically put the brakes on for a while to get the economic pressure off of them, to get the $100 billion. They can go back and have a legitimate nuclear weapons development program in about 10 years. And that's not the security that the world needs. The second is they have not, the agreement gives the International Atomic Energy Authority the right to inspect facilities all over Iran. Iran hasn't let those inspectors go onto their military sites, which are where they would be cheating if they're cheating, and I worry that they are.
And, of course, we've already given them all that money.
Yeah.
So they're actually giving that money to terrorists, which is what we continue to hear.
To terrorists and probably to Hezbollah, which continues to kill innocent Syrian people.
We understand this morning that John Kerry, former Secretary of State, is having meetings with the Iranians. Why is John Kerry running around trying to salvage this deal? Does that impact the so-called Logan Act, where you're not supposed to be negotiating for the country when you don't have an official role?
Well, it's a surprising story. So I'd say this. The Logan Act really hasn't been enforced for a long time. John Kerry is not negotiating on behalf of the U.S. government. I hope everybody he's talking to knows that. But in my opinion, what he's doing is inappropriate, and he shouldn't be doing it. And let's just take two former secretaries of state, Condi Rice, who opposes the Iran nuclear agreement, Hillary Clinton, who supported it. Neither one of them is going around talking to the Iranians, to the Europeans, and trying to, I guess, convince them to not be affected by the current Trump administration. It's a duly elected administration. So I hope John Kerry stops.
Condi Rice joined me this past week and said it's just not a good deal. We shouldn't be there. But will the Europeans go along with us?
Well, I think ultimately they will. They may protest if President Trump pulls out of the agreement. But, you know, in the end, what I appreciate about President Trump in this case and others, he understands America's strength. So he doesn't make decisions based on the worst fears that people say, if he does this, the sky will fall. And here's what I mean. The Iranian economy is, $400 or $500 billion. Ours is like 44 trillion.
Right.
So you give the European banking and business community a choice of what to do if we pull out and slap the sanctions back on Iran. It's no choice. They're going to continue to do business with us, and they're going to turn their backs on the Iranians, and most of the rest of the world will do the same. Then hopefully the Iranians will come back to the table and negotiate a total denuclearization of their country, and then we can welcome them into the world community.
Incredible. Incredible what's going on. And then you've got a North Korean meeting coming up. Senator, it's great to see you. Thank you so much.
Maria.
Senator Joe Lieberman will be right. Devin Nunes went on Fox and Friends and said he is ready to pursue contempt of Congress charges against Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The DOJ has then responded and said, we did respond to him. And Devin Nunes is saying, well, the letter that they sent me said they're not going to comply. So, not sure what the DOJ is trying to prove. They basically are saying we're not going to comply. Meanwhile, a federal judge has slammed special counsel Robert Mueller for overreaching. I want to bring in our panel right here. Byron York is the chief political correspondent with the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. James Freeman is an assistant editor for the Wall Street Journal editorial page. He is also a Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Your thoughts on what's transpiring this morning, James?
Well, I think we're seeing this standoff with on the Nunes end, with Congress wanting to know, exercising its appropriate oversight authority, what happened at the FBI. FBI doesn't want to share the documents. I think either Speaker of the House Paul Ryan has got to hold contempt votes to force disclosure, or the president should start declassifying a lot of information that I think all of us as Americans want to know about what is pretty foundational to our democracy. Was the investigative authority, the surveillance power of the government inappropriately used in a political attack, basically?
Exactly right, James. Byron, your thoughts on this? It almost feels like somebody's trying to let the clock run out.
Well, the problem with this specific Nunes subpoena is we don't know what he's asking for. You just asked Representative John Ratcliffe if he was on board for pushing a contempt citation, and he told you, well, I need to know what we're asking for. So that's a big problem. We do know, though, in the past that Nunes has asked for and subpoenaed information from the Justice Department and gotten stonewalled, and later we find out that there really wasn't a very good reason for it. So the inclination here is to be suspicious of the Justice Department, but I should say we don't know what he's asking for.
Well, because we don't know the scope memo, right? I mean, we need to understand better what the mandate was and is for Robert Mueller, and it's gone really far afield, James.
Yeah, and I think this is what's
a fantastic panel. Byron York, James Freeman, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow on the Fox Business Network, everybody.